If we go into the BMP layer, it will only have scan, and that's the only option we've got. Okay. All right. So in this case, we'll then go in and for each color, we can go in and set various settings on here. The settings that are important generally are is output. That says, is this layer actually going to be sent as instructions to the laser or not? So why would that even be on there? Let's say, for whatever reason, that, okay, well let's say I ran this job once, right? And this piece cut out, this etched, and this piece cut out. But this piece down here, for some reason, didn't cut out all the way, and I need to do a second pass to get it to actually drop out. This little green square represents the start point of the laser here, right? So look at what happens if I were to delete these items up top. Look at that green square. Okay. So if I do that and say, okay, send the job again, it's going to start ruining the part that did work well because it has just reoriented everything. So instead, the way I usually do this is I will take these items here and assign them some different color I'm not currently using. For whatever reason, I've gotten in the habit of making it green. I don't know, greens usually go, good, but for whatever reason, I've gotten in the habit of using that for don't do this one. You don't have to, it's just what I will usually do. And you can see here that for output, actually these are both still set for the last time I used this machine, clearly, because they're both set to output no, right? But the orientation spot is still the same place that it was before. That's my hard-won wisdom that I'm passing along to you. My pain is your gain. And in this case, probably, I'm assuming this image probably would have been etched as well. So I'm going to select that and turn it green also, so that it also won't go. So at that point, it would only redo this piece here. Okay. So, right, let's see, where else are we going with this? Okay, so you assign shapes, different colors for different laser instructions. You make sure all layers have output turned on or off as you desire. And there's actually a shortcut on this version, on version 8, that isn't in version 6, but a shortcut on version 8 where if you just double click under here where it says output, that switches it back and forth between yes and no. Awesome. In there, you have to go into the laser, the layer parameters. Then you program each color with the appropriate instructions. There's cut versus scan. We've talked about that a little bit, right? Oh, so let me talk about how a scan layer works. So, well, let's actually just say if I were changing the black layer to scan. We wouldn't for this, but just for the sake of argument. So in this case, instead of processing mode cut, we go processing mode scan. Things down here change a little bit. Here in this case, we can set minimum power and maximum power. Personally, when I'm doing scan, I always keep them the same. It's the opposite of what one would assume, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Independent output is something that you might or might not want. Essentially, if you've got something where there's, let's say, a little bit of area over here that you want etched, and a little bit of area over here that you want etched, they're in the same horizontal line. If you don't check independent output, the laser head will go zap, travel, 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 zap, zap, travel, 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 zap. Lots of dead time. If you do independent output, it will go zip, 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 zip. Oh, come over here, do the same thing over here. That can backfire on you. I have had some things where I had some vertical stripes on something, and I left it on independent output, and the amount of extra time and energy this has to spend turning around at the end of every stroke ended up like tripling the amount of time that it was going to take. It was really a pain in the ass. So just try to be judicious when it comes to deciding whether or not you want independent output switched on. Okay. The other main important thing, two important things down here are scan mode, X swing versus Y swing. The other one is this unilateralism thing. You're not generally going to need to pay attention to that. That has to do with scan only in one direction and then move back, and scan only in one direction and move back. There's some reasons why you might occasionally need that, but probably not. But X swing or Y swing, that means, is this going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, moving slowly down? Or is it going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, moving slowly right? Right? Generally, we want it to move right to left, slowly moving top to bottom, because the gantry has much more mass. So having to move that back and forth is going to just be more wear and tear on the machine and put more wobble into what's going on. Moving back and forth this way, it actually has the physical ability to move faster than it can going back and forth this way. I think 500 millimeters per second is the highest programmable speed left to right, and 400 millimeters per second is the highest programmable speed back to front. Yes. Okay, so the other thing down here is interval. Interval says if you're scanning, it's moving back and forth and back and forth, moving slowly in the other axis. How far does it move in that other axis with each line? That's the interval, right? And generally, you're going to want to be somewhere in the 0.08 to 1.5 millimeter, sorry, 0.08 to 0.15 millimeter range. Somewhere in there. The finer you have it, the more laser energy will be put onto each spot, and you're making it darker per how much energy, how much power you put into it. So you have power setting, but in the same power setting, get you a darker edge if you've got a lower number in here, because you have more lines being layered on top of each other. Does that make sense? It also means that it's going to take more time to get done, right? The higher a number you have here, the further apart those lines are, and the faster it's going to go. And it's, you know, that's something that's sort of an art to it, to figure out where you'd like to have that number. Generally, I tend to stay in 0.08 to 1.2. But some people recommend all the way up to 1.5. Sorry, 0.12, I meant to say. Some people recommend all the way up to 0.15 or higher, but you can play around with it. Okay, so speed versus power. You use a slow speed and a high power for cutting, and a fast speed and a low power for etching. Right? Now, the settings here are, the processing modes are scan versus cut. The thing is, you don't necessarily have to cut something when you set it to cut. Right? That depends on the speed and power. Essentially, cut mode says follow the line. Right? But if you say to follow the line at a relatively high rate of speed and a relatively low power, then you're just etching along that line, even though it says cut. Get the difference? Yeah. Okay. Here's another thing that's a little bit counterintuitive, but I have discovered to be true. So I'm going to set this black layer back to cut again. I generally tend to set my minimum power at maybe just over half the maximum power. So I'll say like 40 in this case. Right? Here's the reason why. When you are following a line, let me go ahead and close this, actually say okay. When you are following, well, if you're etching and you're going back and forth, the laser can go at top speed until it gets to the last of the dots. Slow down, stop, move down, speed up, and start moving back in the other direction. If you need to follow these and do these little right angle turns, you cannot go at 15 millimeters per second right up to the very second that you turn, the really split second that you turn. It just, physics doesn't work that way, right? So therefore it has to slow down and stop. As smooth as it looks, and it's going to look like it's just moving the same speed the whole way, there is a slowdown and stop there. If it's feeding in a constant amount of laser energy as it does that, then you can get overburning on the corners, which can cause scorching. Sometimes if you're just etching something with a line, then it can actually poke a hole through right there at those points where it stops. So dropping that power for the minimum, it will actually drop down to the minimum power as it has to slow down and stop. And so I found a rough formula that I found works, seems to be about half the speed, about half the power for the minimum as you have set for the maximum. Seems to give me the results that I want. All right, so let's see. Order of layers is important. Depending on other settings people might have accidentally set here in different ways, it's supposed to go from top layer to next layer to next layer to next layer. And that's one way you can make sure that anything on the inside of a cut is done before you then cut the next thing outside. Right? Because once again, things are usually dropping through a little bit and they can get out of focus or misaligned when they fall. So usually want to go from inner to outer to outer. One way you can do that is by multiple layers. There are other more complicated ways you can do it, but that's the way you're going to start with. And if you want to double check that, you would go up to Handle, Cut Optimize. Cut Optimize, see, it does have order of layer checked. Every now and then some goon comes in here and unchecks that for some reason. And then you are like, wait, why is it doing, I swear I have everything in the right order. And then, you know, oh, there it is. Also, the other thing is that if you do this consciously each time and hit OK, it will then, instead of just sort of doing everything in the order that it first finds them in the program, it will go and calculate the quickest route and the most efficient distance to do the cuts. So I don't always remember to do that, and it's not 100% necessary to go and open that thing, but it can be helpful. By the way, one place you'll find a lot of useful stuff is the Handle menu. When you're first working with this and you're trying to figure out, well, how would I do this thing? It seems like it should be common sense that I should be able to do here. The Handle menu is where you're going to find a lot of that stuff. Okay. Also, there are some neat tools that you'll find further down here. Some ones that can create grids of stuff. So you just grab one shape, you want to make 9 of them. You can click this and just say, I want 3 in this direction, 3 in that direction, space them out this way. There's a similar thing here that creates a virtual array where those other things aren't actually there, but they're sort of just ghost images of the other one. So if you then edit one, it'll edit all of them in the future. Whereas here, it just creates new, yeah. So all sorts of different stuff you can play around with here. Like I said, it's a surprisingly full-featured CAD package together with the CAM software. And you'll find some neat things to do in here. Okay, so we're already over 8 o'clock. I need to go ahead and wrap this up before too long here, because I'm only supposed to keep you for an hour. So let's see here. One thing that I'm not really going to go into too much here, I guess I showed you this a little bit last night, but that's because you had a certain thing. This is a raster image that I've already digitized. When I'm doing raster images, there are a couple of different ways to get it to work the way I want it to. I just selected this raster image. I'm going to hit this BMP button here. By the way, if you went into the Handle menu, there's something that says Handle Bitmap. That will do the exact same thing. We'll open this exact same window. There's 2 different paths to the same place. And what I will usually do, and it won't let me do it now because it's already dithered, is I will say dither dot graphic, and then apply to view to get a preview of what it's going to look like. And that will take grayscale and translate grayscale into a map of dots. And at that point, I then say, for that layer, go back and forth and just have 1 power, minimum and maximum of the same power. And it's just, if it finds a black dot, it turns the laser on. If it's off of a black dot, it turns the laser off. Right? Now, this power supply is only so fast, because these are generics, and we bought a replacement one on eBay, and so if you go anywhere over 100 millimeters per second, you're not going to be getting full power on, power off for these things. Generally, up to 150, I find it works just fine. Above that, I will often push it past that, though, because that can painfully slow for etching anything of any given size. So usually you're going to end up somewhere between 150 to 300 millimeters per second on what speed you're going to choose there. We're going back and forth. But then the power, well, so okay, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just click cancel here because I'm not doing that here. But that's how I would suggest, that's how I did the dog photo over there. was through this technique. So then you would just need to choose a speed and power combination to go well together with these. On here, generally, I found, and this can be a moving target because these tubes, when you put them in, slowly degrade over time, so you know it can be a bit of a moving target. But somewhere, so if I'm putting this in a speed of like 300 millimeters per second, I would probably put a power of about 60%, 45 to 60%, depending on what I'm doing, and depending on what my interval is that I've got in there, depending on how dark the picture I want it to come out, depending on how many pixels there are versus, you know, so there can be sort of wiggle room in here, somewhere between 40 and 60%. So somewhere between essentially, so take the speed, knock a digit off the end, and then multiply it by somewhere from 1.5 to 2. Right, so 300, that's where I'm getting 45 to 60.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? But you're going to play around with this and come up with things that work on your materials, work with your stuff, but that's sort of a general starting point to start from. If I'm following an outline and I just want it to etch it, but not to go ahead and actually cut it out, that I've usually got a setting where I do 75 millimeters a second with a high and low of like, I think 15 and 8.
This looks like somebody.
Okay. Right? If I want to cut all the way through 3 millimeter Baltic birch, or 3 millimeter, which is our material of choice around here, or 3 millimeter acrylic, our other material of choice. Generally, I'm going somewhere, and once again, it's a bit of a moving target with these things, but somewhere around maybe 12 to 15 millimeters per second at maximum power, which on here is 85%. By the way, if you put 100% in here, the software will tell you fine, and it'll tell you it's doing it. But this has instructions to disobey those orders. So this has its own microchip inside of it, essentially its own computer. It's called a Ruida controller. And that Ruida controller has instructions that I have programmed it to that says if you get any number above 85%, it's 85%. So if you put it on 90, it's going to be 85%. If you put it on 95, it's going to be at 85%. If you put it at 100, it's going to be at 85%. Right? Okay. So those are just an idea of some of the general numbers that I would use. We're supposed to go ahead and make you some little keychains here. Running a little behind. Do each of you want to make a little, so that you have some time to actually turn the thing on and set something up yourself before we get out of here?
Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah? You say you're fine doing that?
Yeah.
All right, let me grab some scrap wood here.
Do something with it before I forget everything. Yeah.
Are you going to share that?
Everybody's being just as efficient with their wood as I usually am. That's not good. I'm going to go get some wood for my... And I think I saw something on here, forgelogo.rld. No, don't save that. Oh, wrong version. Okay, file. No, so I don't have that already done. I guess not in a version I can use here. Okay, that's fine. I will instead say file import. And I'm pretty sure I have somewhere here Forge GSO black.png. I think that'll do it. There we go. Okay. So I will take that and I will make that about, so I'll go ahead and set up, so this is X and Y width and height here. So I'll go ahead and set, I'm going to lock the width and height ratios together. So then when I resize this, it'll resize proportionally. I'll make this about maybe, oh no, it's probably more like 50 pixels wide. Like 50 millimeters, I should say. So, because let's see, those up there are about 100 millimeters. Yeah, so we don't want it too big in your pocket, so I think that's about right. So, and I'll take it down a little smaller just to make sure that it, there we are. Okay, so then I'm going to draw a little oval here. And that oval, huh? That oval I'm going to unlock because I don't want to keep those things ratioed to each other necessarily. And I'm going to say maybe 60 millimeters wide by, let's say, 30 millimeters tall. Something like that. I'm then going to select these and I'm going to align them to where they're centered on each other. Right? We're then going to do another oval here for the hole that the keychain ring itself is going to go through. So I'm going to select that, and we're going to have that be about 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters. I'm then, once again, going to vertically center all of these things. Okay. Now notice all these things are currently set to output no.
Okay.
Right? If I were to go ahead and say, hey, start this job, it would say there's no layer for output. Also, you will sometimes see that people might have, occasionally some goon has gone and clicked this output select graphics.
Okay.
So there, even if I turn both of these on,
Sorry.
and I hit start, it's going to say no selected graphics. What that means is that if someone's checked this, they actually have to be physically selected for them to go to the proof. So if you ever get that error, look down here as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn these. So here's what I would usually do. I'm going to select this, turn it, say, blue, so that way I can know that I can set that in a different order of what we're doing. I don't think this blue layer this green layer is still here, but for some reason it's still showing up. That happens sometimes. So I'm gonna right click that. We should select all the stuff and delete it. This is a phantom layer that's here. It's not, that happens sometimes, don't worry about it. It's not actually there. So I'm gonna make sure that the bitmap scan happens first, followed by the blue cut layer, followed by the black cut layer. Yep. So I'm going to make sure those things are set correctly. So this black scan layer is output. I want to be yes. Min power and max power I'm going to have be about the same. And I'm going to say, let's say 45. I'm not going to do independent output because it doesn't matter. Interval, this is relatively small, so I'm going to go down to 0.08 to compress things down. X swing is correct. 300 millimeters per second is fine because these are big blocks of color rather than individual pixels, right? So I might even go up to 400, even 500 if I wanted to, but I'm going to stick at 3. So I'll click OK. I'm going to go to the blue one here. So that's a little fast for my speed. I'm going to take that down to, let's say, 15. Minimum power of, let's say, 45 and a maximum power of 85. And actually, I don't even have to go out of this each time. I can just click on the next layer right here and edit it from here as well. But I'm once again going to say 15, 45, 85. Okay? And, oh, wait, except this, yeah, that's right. So I'm going to click OK. It's now usually a good idea to hit our preview button. That way you can see if you forgot anything, or if something's set not the way that you intended it to be set. So I'm going to hit simulation. So it's going to do that, and then it's going to do that. This is a 10 times speed simulation. You can change the speed right here, but it's usually set to 10 times. Now, one thing I realized I forgot to do is I didn't digitize this. Now, it doesn't really matter in this case because it's just black and white. But once again, the way you would do that is to go to select it, hit BMP handle, dither, dot graphic, apply to view. So you can't really see much difference, except if I zoom in, you can see that there's a little bit of a, but you won't really be able to tell much of a difference, but that's there. That's what you would do if it were photographic. It's not really going to have any effect in this. So that looks right to me. So we are just about ready to go. So as I said, I already did the focus depth on here. So I don't need to worry about refocusing that. I need to make sure that's lined up about right. Like I said, this thing here does more harm than good when it comes to figuring out where your laser is, so I'm just going to put it out of the way for the time being. But that looks like it's at about the right spot. There are two different things we can do right now. Okay. We could just hit start. And if we hit start, this thing would start doing the job right now.
Okay.
However, I'm going to have you do something else. So why don't one of you two sit down? Oh, by the way, I didn't get everyone's names. What was your name? Derek. Mary. And Derek. Derek. And
Jared.
Right, yes, right. We met yesterday. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of just hitting start, which is perfectly fine. You can hit start as long as you should make sure to have this closed first. Right? Hitting start would be perfectly fine at this point. However, I like a couple of other features you can get if instead you hit download. Hit download. You can name it if you want, but default was overwrite the previous default item in here, and that's fine. So go ahead and that's what I usually do. It'll say you're going to overwrite a file called default. Is that okay? Yes, it is. Hey, I did it.
Yes.
Okay. So now, if you come up here, this little keypad, you don't have it's in here. It's in here. So now at this point, if you hit File, it will then give you a list of different files that are in here. These are the ones people bothered to name. The top one is default. So go ahead and hit Enter. And that shows up right here. Make sure it doesn't look distorted. If you see that it looks distorted vertically, like it looks stretched out, what does that mean?
It means your rotary attachment's on.
Well,
or
that
setting.
the rotary attachment is being accounted for in the software. So if you ever look at the preview here and you see that it looks stretched, someone was using the rotary attachment earlier and never turned off the rotary attachment checkbox. Which is under the Output tab. You have to click the OK before it'll let you do that. You go to the Output tab. It's this thing down here, Enable Rotate Engrave.
Okay. And we
All right, don't
not
do
like
that right now. I just want to show it to you in case that ends up being an issue. Okay, so now at this point, let's hit the Origin button. The Origin key is not important if you're using the Start button down here, but it is if you're running it from the keypad. Hit Origin. What that says is where the laser head is right now is where I want to be, where the green spot is relative to this.
So if you do it the other way, you just hit start, is that
It-
wherever it is right now?
If you hit Start, that is essentially the exact same thing as hitting Origin from that point. It does the Origin setting for you.
But you
Right.
don't have any.
If you don't do that here, then when I just moved this earlier, it might go and return to the point it was before I moved it to go ahead and start the job.
I got you.
So Origin is important. Now, actually I'm going to flip this for a moment. Hit Frame. That shows you a bounding box of what it's about to do. That can be helpful. That's one of the reasons I like doing download instead of just doing start.
Okay.
Make sure you're not going way off.
Right, that looks like what we want, so go ahead and hit start pause. Oh, sorry. It's right there. No enough extend space. Okay, so, hey, here's something. No enough extend space. Please, no enough extend space. That's English from speakers of other languages.
Okay.
And what that means is that this is, well, it is positioned correctly, but, well, it's not. There are two different not positioned correctly errors you can get. The other one is frame slop. What frame slop means is based on where this green spot is and where this is, it's going to have to do some of the etching or cutting outside of the actual usable area. No enough extend space means, remember when I said that if it's going back and forth, it just over travel? That says the over travel is going to extend beyond the usable area. So all of your design elements are in the usable area, but the over travel is problematic. So I'm going to escape. I'm going to move this over and hit Origin again. So now if we do frame, there's where it's going. Hit start pause. Still, yeah, it's still not enough extend space. Okay, let's do this again. Try it again. I want to make sure you're the one who actually hits the button the time that it works. So it's not like, Jesus. Okay, what's wrong with this thing here? All right, let's move it way over. Let's move it way over here. Okay, Origin. Try again. I don't want it to be where I hit it and that one time is the time it works. Something else
it's
is
the
going on.
x-axis. Is it the
No, yeah,
y-axis?
something else is going on here. I don't see why it would be. That doesn't seem to make any sense. So what's going
What
on?
if we bring the
here?
y down here?
Yeah, hold on. Let me see what's going on. So that's where that is. How big is this thing? It's. Oh, you know what? You remember when I said the green layer was a phantom thing? I wonder if it's actually there somewhere.
Yeah, it's too big.
Is there some other? That's weird.
Output node, the green layer.
I did, but it still takes that into account when it comes to the calculations of stuff. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and go to no. and download again and see what happens. All right, I'm going to start this up and then I'm going to have you do your own after I get it working correctly. Okay, so file, I'm just going to make sure we're getting the correct file because I downloaded that, didn't I? You saw me do it?
Yeah.
Okay, enter. See, and here's the thing, I'm not seeing any extra stuff showing up around the preview. If it were something else showing, you know, it would show up there. However, I do notice there's no green in this right now, so maybe that is hopeful. So origin, and let me hit start. So of course it does work this time. Okay, so that's what I wanted to avoid. I didn't want it to be like every time you hit the button, it didn't work.
That's reality. So that'll
Right.
be good.
Are you kidding? My mother-in-law swears this is actually the way things work. We bought her a printer. So we're like, okay, this is a big printer, it will work. We bought her the same model printer for her home in Maine that she lives in for part of the year, and her home in Greensboro that she lives in part of the year. So therefore, exact same thing. The one here in Greensboro just has always been a little bit wonky when it comes to how it actually connects to the internet or connects to Wi-Fi. And she'll be like, it's not working. So I'll be like, okay, I'll come right over, I'll see what I can do. There's one time, literally, I walk in the door and the printer starts printing. It's like it smells testosterone. It's like, oh, I better work. You know. Yeah, exactly.
I fixed computers like as a side thing for like the retirees in the neighborhood.
Right.
And I don't do printing. I'm like, that's the only thing I'm not gonna do. I'm like, if you need to go to the library or whatever you need to do, I'm not gonna mess with printers. Because as soon as I get it fixed, as soon as I leave, it's gonna break again. Yeah.
I may need to recheck that focus. I might also want to check the lens for cleanliness. That's looking a little bit thick there for that kerf line. So let's see if that cut all the way through. Yep, just about. Okay. Well, I tell you what, since you have gone ahead and gotten some more experience with this, I'll give you the first one here. And you
I actually don't want one, but thank you. I appreciate
you
that.
can leave that here, since I want you to have the satisfaction of actually being the one that, you know, oh no, I actually did this myself.
How do you do it with time?
We're pretty much done.
But you're all right.
I'm fine. I mean, you know, yeah, I'm fine. I just live like 4 blocks from here, and my wife knows I usually run long because I tend to flap my gums a lot. So, okay, so I've gone ahead and hit origin for that spot right there. So hit start pause, and it should go. There we go.
Then you're supposed to peer at it, right?
Well, I mean,